one thing that evoked a program idea that I had called the Film Generation was that among the things that we were looking at now were short films that find a certain kind of new filmmaking artistry. And it began to be apparent to me that the access of 16 millimeter to a whole new generation of people in the film schools, where they were asked to make a film at the end. So now there were festivals of young people's films. So I said to Perry, I wonder if there's a way we could put this together.
We thought that a program, that we would do it thematically. And Jack actually directed all of them except the one program on Film Generation on dance, because he was in California at the time, so that I had to direct it. The first program, we showed George Lucas' first student film. I mean, I was, the one who found finding the film. I looked at 4 of George Lucas' student films, each one of them completely different, each one of them original and brilliant. And he had one film called THX, which was a scientific, sort of futuristic science fiction kind of film. And we showed that. I looked at, and we chose one of Roman Polanski's student films that he had done at the Polish Film School. We showed, for the first time on public television, independent films on national television. It was the first series and many of them became very famous filmmakers. Their talent was shown very early.
At the time, there were no real boundaries in public broadcasting. It was funded by the Ford Foundation. Nobody asked any questions. Whatever you felt was interesting and you could do as an interesting program that would get somewhat of an audience, you were able to do. I went from a situation in NBC where I was dealing with a network driven by numbers to an institution that was driven by ideas. And it was refreshing. It was like going into a whole new environment where only oxygen was provided. And it was great.
The next film that I did was Gertrude Stein, When This You See Remember Me. Actually, it was really a very crucial moment in my life, because I had been working on the film, and it had to be on, at a certain date, because there was a big show at MoMA of the work that belonged to the Stein family. We were working literally day and night. I simply could not cut it anymore. I got it down to 90 minutes, and I just really didn't know what else to do with it. And the man who was the head of NET at the time, I must say, was having a very hard time. He said, we can't show a 90-minute film. I mean, nobody's going to, no, there has never been a 90-minute documentary, an art documentary yet. And so it was Curtis Davis. He was the head of cultural affairs. And we were just, holding our breath. And we showed him the film, the 90 minutes, on the STEIN. And when it was over, there's this silence, and I just not breathing. And he said, I wish my father were alive to see this film. Well, I knew then that he loved it, because he loved his father, and his father had spent a lot of time in France and loved France. And he said, I wish my father had lived to see this film. And, it's a very powerful statement.
It was clear to us that if networking's highest ratings went to drama programs, how could we deal with drama? And I was asked by the head of NET at that point if I would put aside my excitement of all these other things and just focus on drama, if I would become really the first head of drama. It was called NET Playhouse. When we had the transition from NET being dissolved once that PBS was supported by the government, NET then became really an outmoded system. And all of the materials that we had produced at NET were turned over to the local channels 13, which changed its call letters to WNET. So most of the staff were dissolved. My drama unit was the only one was asked to come and move across the street into Channel 13 and STEIN. Perry had some projects at that point that then began to automatically be part of Channel 13's output for national programming. And one of the things that we did was 3 programs about how American artists defined a period. We did the 30s with Warner Brothers clip films, and we did a theater piece, and it was so successful, we decided to do the 40s. Well, it was fine now. We could go back to how the films defined the 40s, but clearly one of the biggest things then was radio. And I thought, my God, how are we going to do that? So I went to Perry and I said, we're going to do the 40s. It was very successful, our 30s series. Would you tackle radio and define how we might possibly do it, since it's a media that was not visual? Well, Perry not only attacked it successfully, but so much so that we ended up with 2 separate programs. The first point was there was comedy, and people like Bob Hope and Beck Jackman, and she was very avid about trying to get those people to talk about it. And her interviews and things were so extensive and so interesting that was going to be part of just one aspect of the program. But in the end, it was expanded to another whole program.
I decided to choose the top radio comedians, and so that would be Jack Benny, the Fred Allen Show. Bob Hope I couldn't get because Bob Hope was out shooting somewhere, the road to somewhere, but Bing Crosby was in, and was very close to him, and did so many programs on radio also with him. They were always joking together. And Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy, and Fibber McGee and Molly. And these were the top radio programs at that time. I remember George Burns saying there were only 10 important programs, and so we were always in the top 10 because there were just 10 of us. And of course, I knew that if I got George Burns to start with, that I had somebody great on camera, and who would be very useful in getting some of the other people. Jack Benny did not say yes until I got Bing Crosby to say yes, and then Jack Benny said yes. So there I was in Jack Benny's office in Hollywood. And the photographer, there was a photographer that they had arranged to shoot while I was shooting. And so he just grabs me and puts me on his lap. And what am I going to say? How dare you, sir? What am I? Jack Benny, who I need to be in the film, wants a picture of me sitting on his lap. I am not about to say no. And this is the kind of thing that happened. I don't know whether it still happens to women producer directors. And so one of the ways that we worked out of doing it was to take the radio sets from the 1940s, and I found a collection that RCA had, and they allowed me to borrow them, and so that we For example, with the show with George Burns and Gracie Allen, we had him sitting in his office, with his cigar, and listening. We had a tape of one of the radio shows, and so he's listening to it, and sort of laughing and smiling and nodding his head. This, of course, is me, Edgar Bergen, Charlie McCarthy, and Bergen was wonderful. He actually did a routine for us on camera. And every time I spoke to him after that about various thing clearances and stuff, he would always remind me, Perry, do you realize, what I did? And none of them were paid. They were all doing this, They were doing this because I think they all loved radio. All loved radio.
She was very creative about how to deal with an impossible subject.
It was a big success. Channel 13 showed it 12 times as a fundraiser.